Welcome to Kieu's channel. If this is your first time here, we'd love for you to subscribe, like, and share so you won't miss any of our heartfelt stories filled with love, hope, and resilience. Today, we'll join Sung Luen and her little daughter Kieu as they set out on a heartfelt journey to find Jame. But this won't be an easy day. Heavy rain is pouring down, turning the paths into slippery mud and making everything twice as difficult for this mother and her child. Before they can leave to search for Jame, there's an important chore that must be done, tending to their small vegetable garden. It's a simple garden, yet it provides food and hope for their little family. The two quietly walk to the old livestock pen at a neighbor's house, pushing an empty wheelbarrow. With small shovels in hand, they begin to scoop up the dark, crumbly compost that was once pig manure left to age over the years. Now it has become rich organic fertilizer, perfect for nourishing vegetables and helping them grow strong and healthy. Carefully, Sung Luen fills a bucket with the compost and gently empties it into the wheelbarrow. She pauses, wiping her face from the rain, then smiles at her daughter. Together, they keep shoveling until the wheelbarrow is full and heavy, ready to be taken back to their garden. This small act of care is the first step before they can begin their long and uncertain search for Jane. Once they arrived back home, Sung Luen and her daughter wasted no time. Together, they pushed the heavy wheelbarrow to the back garden, where rows of young vegetables waited silently in the rain. They knew the downpour could wash the precious fertilizer away, so they had to work carefully and quickly. The small garden was muddy and slippery, but their determination shone through with every step. Sung Luen knelt down beside a row of tender cucumber plants. With her cold, wet hands, she gently picked up tiny stones from the soil and began placing them in a neat circle around each plant's base. The stones formed little protective walls, like miniature fortresses, guarding the roots from the rushing rainwater. Her daughter watched closely, then followed her mother's lead, carefully arranging stones with her small fingers. When each plant was safely surrounded, Sung Luen reached into the wheelbarrow and scattered handfuls of the rich, dark compost into the circles. The earthy scent mixed with the fresh smell of rain, and for a moment, the garden seemed to breathe with new life. Every plant now had a chance to grow strong, and this gave them hope for the days ahead, even as the storm continued to fall. As they worked in the garden, soft clucking rose through the rain. A few tiny chicks scurried between the vegetable rows, pecking eagerly at the soil. They were busy hunting little caterpillars and bugs that could harm the plants. Sung Luen paused for a moment, smiling. Even these small creatures were helping in their own quiet way, protecting the garden she and her daughter had worked so hard to grow. With fresh energy, they turned to the young eggplants. Sung Luen knelt down, scooping rich compost into her hands and gently placing it around each stem, while her daughter followed close behind, copying her every move. Rain dripped from their hair, mud clung to their clothes, yet they kept going, patient, steady, and full of care. Watching the chicks so diligently at work, Sung Luen quietly whispered to her daughter, "Even the smallest helpers can make a big difference." Her daughter nodded, eyes shining, and as the rain continued to fall, their little garden seemed to breathe with life, nurtured by love, hard work, and even the tiniest hands.
After a long and tiring afternoon in the garden, Sung Luyen and her daughter decided they would wait until the next day to begin their search for Jame. They needed to rest, gather strength, and be fully prepared. At dawn the following morning, the first golden light slipped through the thin curtains of their small home. Sung Luyen quietly rose from bed, careful not to wake her daughter, who was still curled up under a thin blanket. She lit a small stove and began preparing a simple breakfast of rice and boiled eggs to give them energy for the long journey ahead. She also wrapped pieces of bread and fruit into a small cloth bag, enough for their lunch later on the mountain. As she packed, her eyes wandered toward the distant hills beyond the window, and she whispered to herself with determination, "Today, we will find him." After finishing their preparations, Sung Luyen gently woke her daughter, and together they stepped out into the cool morning air. The garden glistened with dew, each leaf sparkling like tiny gems. They walked between the neat rows of vegetables, stopping to pick the freshest greens for their breakfast. With careful hands, Sung Luyen plucked each tender leaf, placing it gently into the basket, while her daughter followed closely behind, mimicking her movements. The air was quiet, except for the soft rustle of leaves and the cheerful chirping of birds welcoming the new day. As they worked, Sung Luyen smiled and whispered to her daughter, "Every meal begins with simple things like these. We must always be thankful for what we have and for the work that gives it to us." Her daughter nodded, eyes bright with understanding. In that peaceful garden, among the shining green leaves, she was learning not just how to harvest food, but how to value the effort and love behind every small blessing. With the meal finally ready, Sung Luyen carefully laid out large banana leaves on the table. She gently placed warm rice onto each leaf and wrapped it neatly. When rice is wrapped in banana leaves, it takes on a soft, fragrant aroma, something truly special. You should try it someday. Her little daughter sat beside her, watching closely and handing her the leaves one by one. With patient hands, Sung Luyen used another kind of leaf to wrap the stir-fried vegetables, tucking them securely before placing everything into their woven bamboo basket. When all was packed, she tied the basket shut, then turned to lock the door of their small home. Hand in hand, mother and daughter stepped out into the cool morning air, ready to begin their long journey into the mountains to search for Jame. Hand in hand, Sung Luyen and her daughter began walking along the long, winding path that led up into the mountains. The morning air was cool and thin, carrying the faint scent of pine. Each step crunched softly on the gravel road as they climbed higher, their small figures moving slowly against the vast hills. It was the place where Jame had once lived with them, and in their hearts they carried a quiet hope that they might see him again there. After a long climb, Sung Luyen and her daughter finally reached the little house where Jame had once lived with them. They paused at the edge of the clearing, their breathing soft and steady after the long walk. The house stood quietly, almost hidden beneath wild vines and drifting leaves. Its wooden walls, once warm with laughter, were now faded and cracked. They called his name softly, but only the echo of their voices returned. No footsteps, no sound of life, just the distant cry of a bird circling above.
Slowly, they walked around the small yard, their eyes searching every corner for any sign of him. But there was nothing. The other homes nearby were silent as well, their windows empty, their roofs sagging under years of wind and rain. It was as if time had gently wrapped this place in silence. Hand in hand, mother and daughter stepped toward an old rope swing hanging from a tall tree. It swayed slightly in the mountain breeze, as if remembering. Sung Luyen touched the worn wooden seat, and her daughter climbed onto it, rocking back and forth just as she used to when Jame pushed her gently from behind. A small laugh escaped her lips, soft and bittersweet. They looked around at what remained of their memories, the tiny bamboo table where they once shared simple meals, the outdoor shower they had built together from old barrels and pipes, and the garden that they had once worked so hard to plant. Now, that old garden had changed. There were no vegetables, no rows or fences, but wildflowers had taken over, blooming in every color. Yellow, purple, and white petals danced gently in the wind, painting the place with life again. Sung Luyen knelt to touch one of the blossoms, her eyes glistening. Even though things change, love leaves something beautiful behind. Her daughter crouched beside her, quietly listening. And in that moment, surrounded by silence and flowers, they both felt it. The presence of memories, the warmth of what once was, and the hope that one day they might see Jame again.
With no sign of Jame anywhere, Sung Luyen and her daughter slowly walked back to the shade of the old house. The sun now hung high above the mountains, and the soft morning chill had given way to the warmth of noon. Their legs were tired from the long journey, and their hearts even more weary from the silence. Sung Luyen opened their bamboo basket and carefully unwrapped the banana leaves. The fragrant steam of warm rice rose gently into the still air, carrying with it a sense of comfort. Beside her, her daughter's eyes lit up at the sight of the food, simple, yet filled with the love of home. They sat on a fallen log beneath the tree where the old swing still hung and began to eat slowly. Birds chirped softly from the distant trees, and the wind stirred the wildflowers in the garden where vegetables once grew. For a while, they said nothing. They just listened to the quiet, each bite heavy with both hunger and longing. Between mouthfuls, her daughter whispered, "Do you think he'll come back here someday?" Sung Luyen looked at her, then at the empty house, and gave a small, gentle smile. "I don't know," she said softly, "but sometimes when we hope with all our hearts, miracles can happen." Her daughter nodded, holding on to those words as if they were a promise. And so they continued their small meal beneath the soft mountain sun, their hearts quietly waiting, hoping that somehow, against all odds, a miracle might bring Jame back to this place once more. After finishing their simple meal, Sung Luyen and her daughter decided to walk further up the trail toward the small mountain spring, the place that once brought life to the whole hillside. The path grew narrower, winding between rocks and fallen branches. When they finally reached the spring, they stopped in silence. What had once been a clear, sparkling stream was now only a hollow bed of stones covered with dry leaves. The air was still. There was no sound of water, only the soft rustling of the wind. Sung Luyen slowly knelt down, touching the dry earth where cool water used to flow. Memories rushed over her, of laughter, of days when Jame worked beside her, when life here felt full of hope. Her chest tightened and tears quietly rolled down her cheeks. She turned her face away, not wanting her daughter to see her cry. But little Kieu had already noticed. She ran over and gently called, "Mama." Her small hand slipped into her mother's, warm and comforting. Sung Luyen wiped her eyes, forced a soft smile, and nodded. Together they walked back down to the little house. They sat on the steps, gazing at the wildflowers swaying in the garden. They spoke quietly about the past, about the days when this place was full of life, about how Jame had once filled it with laughter and light. As the afternoon sun stretched across the hills, mother and daughter finally stood, took one last long look at the empty house, and began their descent down the mountain path toward home. Even though they hadn't found him, they carried something just as precious: love, hope, and the strength to keep going. And as you watch their journey, remember this: never give up on the people you love. Cherish every moment and hold on to hope, even when it seems impossible. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to follow more heartfelt journeys from Sung Luyen and Kieu.